In 2008, the world economy was crumbling. The markets crashed, companies folded, and in the midst of it all, Honda, a giant in motorsport, was forced to pull the plug. Their Formula One team, a project years in the making, was left with no money, no backing, and no future. In the face of financial disaster, Honda had no choice but to withdraw from Formula One. Their factories would go silent, their workers laid off, and millions would be lost. It would be the end. Until one man stepped forward, a man who had orchestrated countless victories, a man who had the courage to keep the dream alive. Ross Brawn. Ross Brawn, already part of Honda alongside CEO Nick Fry, stepped up to take over its remains. Honda had a way to salvage those millions of losses if they were to do a full shutdown. For Honda, it was simple math. Shutting down entirely would mean enormous severance costs, millions lost in layoffs, and the weight of unused facilities. Selling, even for next to nothing, was their best way out. So, they took the opportunity to sell it for a mere British pound, just to make it official. This move of Brawn and Fry to keep the team alive struck a chord with the FIA, who, out of sympathy, waived the usual entry fee, allowing Brawn GP to join the F1 season for free. In a single defiant move, Honda's misfortune became Brawn's opportunity. With nothing but a skeleton crew, a pile of last-minute parts, and an idea, Ross Brawn took the reins. The team was saved, but badly. Saving a team was only the beginning. Turning it into a championship contender would be a whole different story. Brawn needed more than just a car to race. They needed an engine. Honda's withdrawal left them scrambling for a solution, and Ross Brawn knew the stakes were high. He turned to them for help. Reliable, tested, and powerful, Mercedes engines would provide the backbone the team needed to take on the rest of the grid. And so was birthed the BGP-1. The deal with Honda was done on March 6, and just up 3 weeks, on March 29, the F1 season would kick off. From the moment they took over, every second counted. No time to test, no time to refine, no time to even question whether this buy was the right move. And the sponsors pulling off and the budget barely holding, funding upgrades and improvements seemed like an impossible dream. No time to test, no time to adjust, and certainly no money to upgrade. The team would literally race on the edge, with only a single spare chassis for the entire season. If they were to hit the wall or suffer a major failure, there would be no backup, no second chance. The weight of every lap, every corner was on them. But amidst all this, Ross Brawn had one thing that no one else could see. An idea. A bold, risky idea. And this idea was his gamble. A gamble that could make or break the future of Brawn GP. The team couldn't afford extensive private testing. In fact, they had barely any pre-season testing at all. They were forced to rely on minimal running and limited time on the track before the season began. Former Honda drivers Jenson Button and Rubens Barrichello were ready to test their pace in a car that barely had any development time. Still, Brawn GP managed to secure Circuit de Catalunya, a track half the length of Silverstone, but with just enough space to get some valuable data. And to everyone's surprise, they topped the timesheets right away. The speed was there. Was it sheer luck? Maybe. There was something special about this car. The pace was real. The 2009 Formula One season kicked off in Melbourne, Australia. Braun GP had gone from a barely surviving buyout to leading the charge of the first race. It was crunch time. No one expected them to be at the top, let alone fighting for the win. Against all expectations, Braun GP wasn't just racing, they were leading the race. Jenson Button, in a car badly tested, suddenly found himself in contention for the win. Rubens Barrichello wasn't far behind either. No one saw this coming. The team with no testing, no budget, and no expectations had just delivered a 1-2 finish, Jenson Button taking the win. It wasn't just luck, the culmination of Ross Brawn's calculated gamble, his idea finally coming to life. The buyout wasn't just a leap of faith, it was driven by something deeper. Ross Brawn had been working on a revolutionary concept the year before, while still at Honda. An idea that could give the car the edge it needed to win races. Double diffuser. This was a new approach to aerodynamics, which allowed their car to generate significantly more downforce, giving them an edge in both speed and control. With this extra downforce, Braun GP could take corners faster and accelerate sooner, shaving off crucial milliseconds that other teams couldn't match. So, when Honda was ready to walk away, Ross Brawn didn't just save the team, he bought it, and he bought that vision with him. But it didn't take too long for other teams to notice this too. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Braun GP's secret weapon. Rival teams scrambled to understand how they had been outsmarted by a team that had almost disappeared from the sport. With a powerful head start and unexpected dominance, Braun GP seemed unstoppable. But their rivals weren't about to let them take the championship without a fight. Rumors started swirling in the paddock. Teams claimed that the double diffuser was a breach of the rules, an unfair advantage that had no place on the track. Formal protests were filed, meetings were held behind closed doors, with rivals insisting that Braun GP's diffuser wasn't just innovative, it was illegal. For Ross Brawn, this was just another challenge. He believed in his team's design and stood firm, defending the legality of the double diffuser. After intense scrutiny, the FIA finally announced their decision. The diffuser was deemed legal. Braun GP's innovation would stand, the team was free to race. The protests only added fuel to the fire. Now, the entire grid was chasing them down. The legal storm behind them, Braun GP's brilliance on the track remained undeniable. Button bagged 6 wins in 7 races. Even as they secured victory after victory, their greatest challenge was not their rivals, it was their bank balance. Though the legal storm had passed, it was far from smooth sailing. The other teams, especially Red Bull, were quick to adapt. Braun GP's early dominance was slowly being chipped away by relentless competition and technological advances. While the world was caught up in the legal drama, Braun GP's competitors had started closing the gap. In the background, a new giant was emerging. Red Bull, led by the dynamic combination of Sebastian Vettel and their growing technical team, started to catch up to Braun's early dominance. Each passing race, Braun GP faltered. No wins in the next 10 races. The advantage that they had at the start of the season was evaporating. The team's success was hard-earned, but the funds to develop the car were running dry. There was no money to push forward, no resources to improve, and with the others catching up, the dream was starting to fade. What had once looked like an unstoppable force began to unravel. While Red Bull poured money into innovation, Braun was barely scraping by. Limited resources, the car stagnated, unable to compete with the newer, more powerful designs. Braun's one chassis, one car approach was taking its toll with Jenson Button crashing out in Belgium. Button, who had once raced to victory, was now fighting just to hold on, his chances slipping with every race. As the season drew to a close, Vettel and Red Bull were coming on strong. The young German driver was giving it everything he had, closing in on Button's lead. The Braun GP car was fumbling, and Vettel wasn't giving up. Red Bull and Vettel were on fire. Each race the gap closed and the pressure on Button mounted. The young German's determination was evident. The championship seemed to slip from Braun's grasp. Button, on the other hand, was doing everything he could to hold on to his lead. As Red Bull's car continued to evolve, Braun's stagnation was becoming more apparent. But here's the twist. Despite Vettel's relentless charge and Red Bull's increasing speed, Button's early season dominance, thanks to the sheer brilliance of the Braun GP car, gave him a lead that proved too much to overcome. And all Button had to do was to finish races in a decent position, which he did. The early part of the season had been all Button. Braun GP's advantage was so huge that even though Vettel was faster in the later stages, the lead Button had already built was enough to save him. The head start from those early victories made all the difference. By the time the final race arrived in Brazil, Button's lead was hanging by a thread. Vettel's late charge had been fierce, but the early brilliance of Braun GP's car still had enough of a margin to keep Button in the game. Vettel went for the win, but Button kept his cool. He didn't need to win, he just needed to finish in the right position to claim the championship. And despite Vettel's late surge, it was Button who claimed the title. And with that, Braun GP's improbable championship story came to an unforgettable conclusion. This is the story of Braun GP, a team born in Formula One's 11th hour. They started with nothing, no resources, no testing, no time, a last-minute engine swap, a single chassis to last the season, and a budget that could barely keep the lights on. But somehow, they went from almost gone to unbeatable. Braun GP's fairy tale season was sealed. The championship celebrations came to an end. The team was eventually sold off to Mercedes. The legacy of that one incredible season, however, never fade. Mercedes now had the resources to build on the legacy of Braun. But the question remained, could they maintain their success, or would they falter under the weight of the pressure and expectations? The years that followed, Mercedes would face its own fierce battle, not just on track, but within their own team. A rivalry that would test the limits of loyalty, competition, and the will to win. The Silver War had begun. The battles on track were just the beginning. What happens when teammates become enemies? What happens when ambition blurs the line between a friend and foe?